time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnet Bain. Good moment, everyone.
Good moment.
Boy, it's great to be back here.
It's always fun.
It is. Well, it's not always fun, but it's mostly mostly fun. If it's not fun, then I have to look at why not.
Why not?
I have to share this funny image. So yesterday afternoon, very, very low tide out here at the beach, and I look out of my window and I see a little neighbor boy who is, I guess, his name is Leon. Hi, Leon, if you're listening. I'm sure this is just the show he listens to.
Show for 4-year-olds?
Exactly. So he's riding a motorcycle.
What?
Up and down the beach, he's riding this motorcycle. He's this teeny little 4-year-old kid with, and he has a helmet on like Darth Vader. It's like comes down to his shoulders, and he's riding this motorcycle.
Wow.
Up and down and up and down and up and down. And now he comes from a family of athletes and extreme sport athletes, and
okay, that makes some sense.
Comes from a family of champions.
Yeah.
And so it caused me to, I stopped because initially there was this sort of triggered down, this flooding of all sorts of...
what is this?
Mostly judgments.
Right. I immediately said 4-year-old riding a motorcycle. I'm like, what?
And then I
on the beach by himself.
I slowed it down because I began to realize, well, there are contexts of... there are contexts here of comfort zones and of excellence, and what really are the contexts here? Is this is this appropriate? Is this abusive? Is that? But and then again, this is also the air that is breathed in that family.
Yeah.
So
it's normal. For them.
Things are simply not. Such a well-adjusted kid and such a terrific kid, and so it's parenting is complex.
Oh my gosh!
And if you come as I do from a mid-century Jewish background, then you have. I don't care whether you're 4 years old or 40 years old. Motorcycles are toxic.
What are you doing?
So, such grist for the mill.
Such grist for the mill.
Such a wonderful way to get into a conversation that I want to get into right away.
Okay.
Because I'm very, very excited about the guest that we have on Cutting Edge Consciousness today. She is somebody who's become a really close friend really quickly. And some of our listeners may recognize her from some of the Milton Secret promotions. She is a colleague on the Milton Secret and on the faculty of what is developing in the Milton Secret area. And I'm referring, of course, to Dr. Shefali Tsabary, who is the author of The Conscious Parent, and who has a new book coming out that we're going to talk a little bit about called Out of Control. I'm holding this up to our in-studio cameras. These are the galleys. Advanced reading copy. That is not the title.
That's so we could have a head start in this conversation.
And Shefali has a practice in Manhattan, and we are very, very grateful to have you with us here today on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, Barnet started us off, and there is this kind of parenting paradox. So many of us, and I'll set this up from my own experience. I came out of I'm going to call my generation a therapy generation, where this is coming out of the 70s into the 80s and 90s, where we got into therapy and we started really dissecting what our parents did or didn't do, quote unquote, right. And then we had families of our own. We had children. And we went on this kind of neurotic, hyper-parenting, perfect parents.
Dumping your shadow on your kids.
Which is really dumping my shadow. And so here's the parenting paradox, because we're trying to be perfect, right? And if you actually succeeded at being perfect, you fail. Because the nature of parenting is it's not precise. There's some variables in this, including perhaps letting your 4-year-old ride a motorcycle on the beach. I don't know about that one, but who knows, right? That's kind of where we're at. That's sort of an open statement, because I know you have a lot to say about the process of being in a learning as you raise your kids. So it's not a one directional, I teach my kids what to do and that's the right way. There's this relationship in the parenting experience where everybody grows, and that's kind of what I was trying to set up.
Exactly, but it's so beautiful that you start this conversation in this way, that we all begin the parenting process with this intention, such a well-intentioned idea that we should be better than our parents were and be perfect. But you're right, therein lies the entire dysfunction, because there is an idea, and ideas are never really good when it comes to children because they keep us stuck to fantasy, and that just mires us in all this disappointment when the fantasy doesn't get met. Then we hold ourselves to some ideal, which means we're already coming from scarcity, and we believe we need to be perfect, and therefore everyone around us needs to mirror that perfection. And then thirdly, we will then, since no one is only unidimensional and no one can only be perfect, what do we do with all that messy stuff, which is really as perfect as the other stuff that we want to be perfect? But what do we do with that stuff that we now deem as imperfect, right? Where does all that stuff go? And inevitably, it goes via judgment, via shame onto our children, and we need to get out of this entire paradox and enter the journey in a different way with a different energy. Just like you went through, Barnett, watching that kid on the beach, you first had inordinate judgment, and then you had to say, wait, that's me, that's my story, that's my box. Who am I to say? What am I? And then you began doing, this natural check-in process, which got you to a place of openness again. But I think many parents don't do that, and so we get stuck, and we, get our children stuck in, inside our mess as well.
Well, you say our children deserve to be nurtured by parents who are journeying towards wholeness and discovering their personal worth, their own worth, that this is the right of all children. It's a birthright. And it is our sacred calling as parents. And I think that there is no more beautiful bottom line for parents to than that, to fully understand that the opportunity to parent another human being is really the process of self-parenting.
Yes, and very different from seeking perfection, right? So wholeness, integration and wholeness comes from a deep self-inquiry and introspective journey into one's own limitations, one's own shadows, one's own pain, and kind of learning to be with that and learning to tolerate one's own immaturity and take full responsibility for that. And that radical self-acceptance will then emanate forward. And that's what our children deserve, to bask in someone who kind of knows what their crap is and is okay with it and doesn't dump it on them, so they can discover their own crap, because they will have to undo a lot of their own stuff that they came in with, and they came in with this energy that they may or may not serve them, and they're going to have to deal with that. But they can't deal with that as well as the parents' unfinished business, and that's where the inequity lies, and that's where our children don't get to live out their own stuff.
So until we understand that as parents, we are inevitably going to default to a domination model. We're going to attempt to control another human being in a sometimes aggressive, sometimes violent, and always passive-aggressive attempt to manipulate them into conforming to my worldview and to my values.
and I mean this idea of just dumping stuff. This is, I think, what you're speaking to, and how much am I projecting? So
100%.
Right. So until
it's 98%.
Here, kid. Here's 2% within which you can grow. The rest is me just putting my junk on you.
That 2%. I mean, listen. I think that, and I want to hear what you have to say about
this. Oh, Barnet.
Our job as parents is to, yes, you work, doctor, heal thyself. But if I can create 2%. If I can create an environment that is sufficient, that allows a child to escape my own damage sufficiently to begin sufficiently intact so that they can take responsibility for their own lives, then my life as a parent will have been a triumph.
Exactly.
I'm curious. 2%? Really? That little bit is a little more space than that, Barnet.
You know, a blade of grass can shatter concrete.
All right.
I have no delusions about. I used to have a delusion about something that the culture loves this idea of unconditional love. And I know Shefali's going to be
good luck
laughing
with that one.
already.
Yeah.
You know, unconditional love. And I'll share briefly, and then I want to hear from you, Shefali, about your thoughts on this. I had the delusion of unconditional love. I'm so loving, and I'm such a loving father, and that which was fine, as long as my daughter lived inside.
As long as she met the conditions.
Well, as long as she was a clone of my values, and then she went off to college, and she became like she started to break these unilateral contracts that I'd made with her, and she began to have her own ideas and to populate her life with choices that triggered me and made me nuts. And I had suddenly I had a whole lot of judgment, and I had a lot of stuff to say, all of it controlling. And she, I don't know where she got this from, probably her mother. She said, you talk a really good game, but it's all BS.
Yeah.
Because let me have my own life, and you're hurting me. And, tearfully, that didn't all change everything overnight, but I understood very quickly that the fuzzy, warm and fuzzy love and light, it's all sweetness and light, and I have unconditional love. God has unconditional love.
Right. But 1/2% probably came from that conversation.
Yeah. So, Shefali, what do you have to say about parents and unconditional love?
Well, it is a myth. It's a delusion, and every parent who comes to me ridden with guilt and shame about, Dr. Shefali, I yelled at my kid, or even worse, I slapped my kid, and, even worse, I called my kid a loser, and they are just
Have you ever talked to my mother?
Your mother's finally in therapy. Oh, it's good to know.
So they then get mired in their egoic judgments of themselves, of how they should have been and how they're not. And then when they look at me and they see, as much as I can muster non-judgment, because I really don't have judgment, that is my expectation, sadly, of us as humans, that we are going to project 150% all the time. And when we're very, very, very lucky and things have gone, and all the conditions are right, and every cloud is in its place, and every tree is standing just the way we want, we may release our children for that 2%. And our children, if they're very, very smart and quick, they will slide by and survive. But this is the fate of humanity. But it's not a passive acceptance of this fate where I want us to stop. I want us to radically accept that we do have these delusions coming out of a great eagerness, but a great childish immaturity and a refusal to accept that consciousness doesn't work like that. It's an evolution. It comes through the projection if we're brave enough to witness it. So it's not that we should never project, because that is just unavoidable. Just like having thoughts is, unavoidable. You are going to have thoughts all the time. It's about being the witnesser and learning to be brave enough to see the self in that projection and reel it back in, take it back to where it belongs, which is the self, and do the work that needs to be done. That is courage. That is perfection.
And that is radical. I mean, we love to tell our triumph story. We love to the point about the unconditional love, which is humorous, is how infatuated we are with that, and everyone collectively here agrees. Nonsense.
I even yell at my dog once in a while.
Oh, come on.
If you can't have unconditional love there. So We have in 15 minutes. Congratulations to us. We have diagnosed the problem, and the problem is control. And so, what I want to
why don't we do it after the break?
We're going to take a break. We're going to manipulate people now into buying cars and stuff. And then when we come back,
I don't know if our sponsors love that, Barnet, but go ahead.
We're going to have new sponsors next week.
Yeah, we might have none next week.
And when we come back, we're going to talk with Dr. Shefali Tsabary about moving from control to connection.
Stay with us.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain and our amazing guest,
Shefali.
I can't say your last name, Shefali.
We'll practice later in the parking lot outside
I
the
can
studio.
spell it.
We'll practice.
So wait, you had a bold idea. You queued up a bold idea.
I did have a bold idea.
What was it?
I wanted to ask Shefali about some of the practical responses to what triggers us into control, what triggers us into our love affair with domination that we call
love.
We nobilize it in the culture. And there's a whole history of how we're socialized to nobilize discipline, which is violence. We have a way to nobilize these kinds of behaviors. We don't really need to thread down the path of how that came to be. But there is an alternative to, people think, well, if I'm not disciplining, then what? So, Shefali, then what?
Well, first, let's just lay down one more stone in the foundation, that the idea that
Put another inch between your mouth and the phone.
Okay. So the idea, is this better? Am I clear?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Sound
Okay.
great.
So the idea that as a parent, I say to myself, I will discipline you, my child, just there, discipline becomes the verb that is being done to a child. And that is very different from the original intention of the word disciple. Disciple, is someone who's a learner, who's to be educated, who's to be supported, who's to be helped. And when we as parents say, I'm going to discipline you, it is said with a whole lot of violence, with a whole lot of intimidation, coming out of this desire to control and fix and contort the other into the ideas within one's own mind. So first, parents need to really understand that. If we change it to, I will help my child to be self-disciplined. Oh, wow, then the operative word is help, and then our energy changes. But this is not what we mean when we say discipline. And, people are going to revolt against this idea that discipline and the way it's being handled and mishandled is the cause of all our problems, because egos are going to go up in arms and people are going to feel helpless without this tool that they have now nobilized, as you say. So what then? What can happen in its place? Well, in its place can be inquiry and investigation and curiosity and empathy and bonding and relatedness and, a connection of one person who truly understands that the other person is fundamentally good, but just doesn't know how to express what they're feeling right now.
I love this. Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I love that language. I'm going to help my child become self-disciplined. There's a lot.
You should write that down, Freeman.
I did. And there's more on that.
Give that to your child.
Give that to myself. Remind myself every day when I'm hollering at my kids. The other piece that is really seems to fit with this is, and this is where I really recognize. So I have two sets of children. I have an older son who became my son when he was 10. So he's my stepson, who's now 24. And I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. With Josh, one of the things that I may have not done as well, I won't say failed because it is what it is, was to help him be self-reliant. This is a big part of what I'm watching now is he's moved back in with us, And there's so many things he still relies on us to do. And it's like, wow, I failed in some way. Like part of the gig was not doing things for him, but empowering him to do it for himself, which is the other half of what I hear you saying, and helping them to be self-disciplined, right?
Exactly. So let's take a practical example of an 8-year-old girl who refuses to go to school on time. And the mother is constantly in a battle with her to get ready on time, and she doesn't get up on time, and then she doesn't brush her teeth on time, doesn't get ready, her clothes on, and doesn't leave on time to make the bus. So what do you think a typical parent, how do you think a typical parent would react to that?
Well, we don't even have to guess at this, because I have an 8-year-old girl who does behavior very similar to this. We lose our mind. We run around. We get her clothes. We push her. We get all crazy, and we amp up the situation, and we make it into, and we ritualize that, so every day it's a repeat of the same drama.
Exactly, because the fantasy
I know.
Go ahead, the fantasy is.
Oh, sorry. Was that a question to me?
Yes. What's the fantasy? Because when we keep creating the same madness, we have a fantasy that's underlying it.
Well, I'm going to toss that to Freeman, because it is a real situation for him, and blissfully, I have not had that. I have not been cast in that role since my daughter was 8, and now she's 25.
From my perspective, what I want to do is create options and create a sequencing of consequences. Like, look, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. That's really, in my mind, a good day, because many days I just feed into the crazy making that's become ritualized and habitualized in our lives.
Your fantasy is that
you
will be able to...
well, I'll get her to do it.
That your will...
That my will...
Your will
yes.
will...
I can dominate her into doing... Yep.
Will supersede her choices, and she will conform. She will submit.
That's it.
Well, and that's the fantasy, right? So as a parent, you have a goal to get your child to be self-reliant, to get herself ready to school on time. It's developmentally appropriate. You've had enough practice. You're not just handing her a job to do that she's not equipped for. However, you are meddling in the process big time, right? You're meddling in the process and not allowing the natural consequences to set in. Now, what would be the natural consequence of her not getting ready for the 50th time on her own? Go ahead. What would be the natural consequence?
Well, she'll be late to school.
Exactly. Now, how would that make you feel if she was late to school?
Yeah, now I'm too practicalizing, because in our case, I have to take her to school.
You're not actually answering.
Yeah, no, I know that. It's about me. The small part of me thinks it's a reflection of me, that I don't want the school to think I'm a bad parent. I don't have control of my kids.
Right.
I take it personally that
You're failing.
That she's have a learning experience I perceive to be my own failings. So I'm
Okay,
projecting
good, but-
failure onto her, essentially. Did I go
Okay,
too
now
far?
what if she was then reprimanded by school because school won't like her to be coming late or missing school? So how do you feel about her feelings about that? What do you imagine that would look like?
Well, now I'm, she could get kicked out of school. I mean, the consequences get pretty extreme in my little fear thoughts. So I could go pretty far with that. I could make myself pretty crazy about that.
So you get totally triggered.
I get completely triggered on that one. The minute I'm starting to feel like people
You
don't
lose
think
control.
I'm a good parent, we're out. I'm trying to get everything tucked in.
So you're feeling personally out of control.
Totally.
Right, but that's why you're yelling and meddling and rescuing. You're not doing it because it's doing her any good. You're doing it because you can't manage your own emotions around her facing a natural consequence. And that's why the book is called Out of Control, because it's always out of a desire to control our own unmanageable emotions that we then act out of control, like in a controlling way.
So I don't know if this is the solution you would offer, but I'll tell you what we have done in our family, because maybe this is a good idea, and maybe you'll tell me, Freeman, stop doing that. We created a family vision. We created a quality of experience in how we want to relate to each other. And there's about 8 or 9 items. And then we have practices that are the behaviors, the choices we're making that we want the kids to self-select into. So it's a problem-solving kind of thing. And then we have some standards, some things we will and won't do. And yelling is on there. So there's some things that we're not going to do. We created a standard, we're not yelling. So we have to find other ways to communicate. Frankly, that's worked fairly well in problems similar to the one we're talking about. Until, nice.
Wow.
Barnett just smacked his microphone.
Fell on my microphone.
Until it doesn't work, which my wife brought up in the Wives show, that we have this great vision and it's so great until we revert back to screaming and yelling. But that's what we're doing. I don't know if that's something you would say that's a great idea, Freeman. I mean, it's worked, so I know it's helpful, and I really feel good about our family meetings. We do it once a week. We have a nice brunch. Everyone comes together. We read through the vision, and
well, the intimacy part.
Yeah, I love that part, but also the effectiveness. It comes back to what's the choices we're making in service to the quality of experience we want to have. That works.
Exactly.
And the doctor says.
And the doctor says, "Ding, ding, ding."
That's good. I like that.
Oh, winner!
Ding, 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 ding.
I was sweating. But no, that's because the part of me wants everyone to like me. That's my little fragment that gets in the way of making better decisions.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as long as the parent can see that it's that own little child self within the parent that feels, that wants to be liked, wants to be valued, wants to be heard, wants to be in control, then we can kind of release our children from the blame and shame when they don't do that, because they're not here to kind of fix us. They're here to kind of take care of themselves, and they're kind of surviving in this, often vile world and they need help, and they're not here to kind of help us deal with it. In fact, it needs to be the other way around. So.
And we live in we've been socialized to one degree or another, to feel that other people are part of property rights, whether it's our children or they're ours to do with what we want, or women that we get to control, and that we get to reduce somebody's humanity every time we make them wrong, or we blame them, or we don't see them, we don't hear them, we don't allow them to be who they are. We have so many expressions of this violence that proceeds out of this relationship that we have to ourselves and to others. So many different expressions of it. And one of them that, Shefali, you and I have talked about this a great deal, and will more so, we're coming up. One of them is the bullying issue, which is very much an expression of this kind of command and control ethos, that it's just accepted that we live in a hierarchical reality, and people buy into that, and probably because at certain levels they don't feel the result of being marginalized this way is people lose their own sense of confidence and their own sense of self-respect, and they become dependent on others on parental figures.
Well, can I add something to that? Because systemically, I mean, this also gets nobilized. I mean, sometimes the bully is called the leader. So, I mean, there is this way that...
Some of our banks, for example, I mean, some of our banking institutions, and our politicians, they bully us, and they are nobilized as leaders. So, Shefali, what light would you like to shine on that?
This is really the sickness that's pervading our minds and our children's hearts. This hierarchical separateness, this idea that there is an I versus you, and we compartmentalize everyone in an I versus you kind of mentality. And not only that, then we compartmentalize psychologies within one person into good versus bad. So this duality, this dualistic way of looking at the world is really the root cause of why everything goes amok later on, and why bullies are created, because bullies have been told that there are good parts of themselves and there's bad parts of themselves, and the bad parts have really been looked at badly, and they're carrying all this shame. And so when they look at another kid, they compartmentalize the other kid into good versus bad, and mostly it's bad because they have more bad in them, and then they just vomit it out on them, and it just continues on and on into institutions, into countries, into governments. And because we're fundamentally, delusioned to believe that there is an I versus you in the first place.
Right.
Instead of realizing
it becomes very systemic in our culture. It's interesting because I do some corporate training, and some consulting work, and I'm working with a team, and we do a very similar process to what I was describing that my family does, the family vision, right? With a vision, some practices, and some standards, and quality-based vision. What's the quality I'm going for? What's fascinating is I recently brought in the family vision to them, and it translated really well, because the idea, what if we're a family? What if we're interdependent? Because what I walked into as a culture was very codependent. And how do we get to where we're interdependent? How do we get to where that people's, are really respecting and honoring each other and self-selecting into roles versus being bullied, which I think was a big part of the way they operated. So this is, I love the conversation about parenting, but what we're sort of opening up now is how many other areas of our lives it crosses over into, right?
But the sadness is that you are saying, what if we are interdependent? Instead, that should not be a what-if reality. That is the reality.
Well,
we are interdependent.
Yes.
And the what-if crazy schism that we've created in our perspective is that the bully has become the natural order of the day. But actually, that needs to be the what-if reality. That's the insanity here.
Absolutely. When we had Greg Braden on recently, he was talking about this very same thing. He was talking about, survival of the fittest is a misinterpretation of reality, that we are actually cooperative by nature. And the idea that there is this survival of the fittest is a kind of schism, a kind of sickness in the belief structure of the collective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that you remembered that. I love that you remembered that we had Greg on. I don't remember anything. I'm so in the moment. Did we had Greg on, really?
Oh, Barnett doesn't remember what he had for breakfast.
Well, let's talk a little bit about being present for a second. I am curious about how in your practice you introduce this idea of presence.
Presence?
Of presence and of being in the moment, of attuning ourselves to what is happening now.
Yeah, unfortunately, or inevitably, suffering and pain is the best teacher. So it is through the contrary, because we humans must learn through, hardship. For some reason, we can't learn to take in what's right in front of us, which is so beautiful. But it's when we are kind of at the edge or a precipice of some sort of great life change that we can awaken. So I leverage that, so it's through the contrary principles of what's manifesting in their life that I show them how to enter presence. So what do I mean by that? So if a parent is continually in a power struggle with their child, I love that. That means they're going to be closer to changing than if they were not in a power struggle with their child. And then you may say, well, if they're not in a power struggle, maybe they don't need to change. And I will say to that, well, we always need to change. It's just that we get complacent and we stop being aware when, quote-unquote, things go according to our flow. So I like when there's power struggles at home if the parent is able to leverage that as an opportunity to change. And then I show parents how they were not attuned, how they were they missed an opportunity to connect with their kid. And then I teach them the subscript of their own energy patterns and the subscript of their children's energy patterns. So when your child says, I hate you, stop glomming on to the egoic manifestation of her inner pain. What she's really trying to say is, I'm feeling out of control. I really don't like that you're making me feel like this. Help me to get back into a state of control because I really don't want to have these feelings. So that's how I teach parents to get back into presence, by doing away from the superficial manifestations of behavior and understanding the emotional needs that we all have underneath.
What's so beautiful about that, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about when Barnett and his daughter had the blow up, is that the blow up was what created the 0.5 of 1%. That's where some humanity.
I thought I had 2%.
Well, you got to 2%. But I'm saying that conversation alone probably accounted for 0.5 of 1% of the 2%.
Even my milk has 2%. Give me the full 2%.
So we have come to the end of the segment, and we are unfortunately going to have to say goodbye. But here's the good news.
But we will have you back.
Well, you're going to come to LA. I know that you were going to come sooner, but now that's been put off. But when you get here, on your calendar,
We're going to have you in
need to
studio.
schedule an in-studio visit because we'd like to have you back again.
I would love that. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
But for now, let's give folks the information because I want them to have access to you as a resource.
Well,
what is the best website?
Before we do that,
Okay.
I want people to know that Shefali's a new book, Out of Control, Why Disciplining Your Child Doesn't Work and What Will, what is the street date for that, Shefali?
When does it hit the
Sorry,
press?
Barnett?
What is the street date for Out of Control, the new book?
Yeah, it was just released 2 days ago.
2 days ago, so
fantastic.
you can rush to. I've read it, so you can see that my copy is well thumbed. You can rush to Amazon, and I can't encourage you more strongly to read this, and as well. You can check up on all of Shefali's work. Where? Do you have a website? You do.
Yes, it's drshefali.com.
Great.
Nice.
www.drshefali.com. And if you haven't already been aware of The Conscious Parent, now you are.
And we, of course, will have all of this on our website. So thank you again, Shefali. And for those of you listening, we invite you to stay tuned because Barnett and I will be right back after these messages to wrap things up here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Well, that was a lot of food for thought. I'm chewing and chewing and chewing. I'll be chewing for quite some time. Lots and lots of food for thought. And I have read both Out of Control and her first book, The Conscious Parent. And these are really, for any parent, and, you know, I consider myself still a parent, although my daughter is an adult. I am now parenting myself.
That's a good point.
And I have so much stuff that is unresolved from my own earliest years. And every time, you know, I used to think, oh, that's all handled and tucked in. And that's very naive. And every time that I am triggered in anything that is going on in my life, it is invariably I am hearing from some ghost of my own past that bears reparenting. And so I turn to these as go-to resources for my own process of reparenting.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm right in the thick of the parenting with my 8-year-old and my 10-year-old. Who are my master teachers? Because this whole idea that we're learning together, that the journey, I think of my life in these sort of stages, that my learning prior to marriage, because marriage changed the learning process and definitely up-leveled the whole learning experience about who I am. And who I am in relationship reflected back to me so much about my desire to control and manipulate my wife. How much I held her as an object versus really allowing her otherness and her individuality and her humanity to be part of the sacredness of our relationship. That's like the stage. That stage was really important. Well, now you add the kids, you know, or 10 years ago or whatever. Actually, Josh came with her. So we had Josh sort of immediately in our lives, which was another dimension of my ability to, you know, to grow, to expand, to allow for. And my kids are always teaching me.
Well, let's look for a second at this word grow, to grow. And sometimes I find that the impact of that word is lost on me because it's so overused that I don't really dive into and allow myself to feel a connection to the implications of that, especially around having connection with other people, seeing them, hearing them, allowing them to feel seen, to feel heard, that they matter, and that I am truly present and listening, but and not seeking to control them. I'm not trying to change them. But my framing of growing is that I am willing to be changed by them, and more, I am experiencing the impact, the sometimes discomfort, the awkwardness, the feeling that the rug has been pulled out from my feet. I have a less of a sureness about life. I want to be changed by other people.
I think that's a definition of grow. I think that's beautiful. I mean, thank you, because I do think that we say it so quickly.
We say it quickly.
That we lose track of what the heck it means. It can
but
also...
as a parent, I mean, as a parent, the balance between creating an environment that supports and nurtures, offers guidance and intimacy, and the awareness that the parent-child relationship is a mirror of what is going on in my own consciousness, in my own process.
Big time.
When I am triggered, it is about me.
Yep.
And when I take pride, I'm literally taking something. I am, it is one thing to be happy about the triumphs, the successes, the achievements, the growth of my child, but to take pride,
right, to be identified with it.
To be identified with it is, there's a sort of like a Dracula type energy around taking pride. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to push back on that one.
No, I think it's really good. It's interesting.
Pride goeth before.
Yeah. That's the big.
You don't want to
card.
be proud, but you do. I mean, to have joy in the growth of others is very different than I am going to be proud of you, because you're not a painting that hangs on my wall.
It's interesting because I can see this easier in other people than in myself, but I'd love to take ownership of it. When someone is really identified with their kids' successes, and they're constantly bragging about their kid, and they're constantly, over-identified with what their kid did or didn't do, it's jarring for me. It's really hard not to feel like that imbalance. I have a really hard time with it. And so this is one of those places where we always go, and so am I, because I really go like, wow, that's so unattractive. I would hate to think, that's the one. I would hate to think that I'm like that. And yet, ouch.
I have another little thing that I noticed and that triggers me, and I realize, and so do I. There's someone that I've noticed on social media who posts an awful lot about their child and refers to, and beautiful posts with glowing with, well, in this case, pride, but glowing with pride, also cut with lots of love and lots of tenderness and tremendous affection and but he refers to the child as the boy.
Oh my gosh! Oh, that's
a picture
interesting.
of the boy with this accomplishment, subtext, subscript, of which I am tremendously proud. The boy, or the young prince, or the little prince. So there are all of these titles, but not the name. So this now I realize, again, up come my judgments, and I instantly have judgments about it, and then there's a gap between that and the ownership of it. That is the part of, that is the me that I remember the invisibility. I remember not being known for or loved for who I am, but for what I did.
That's it.
And so so not really having a name. Life is a kaleidoscope of cascading mirrors, and it is always personal. The paradox there is, take nothing personal. Take nothing personally, and the paradox is, and it's all personal.
It's all personal.
So both, how do you do that dance?
Wow. Well, we've come to the end of the show, but it's such, again, another cliffhanger. So much to chew on.
We had some number of cliffs we have hanging that we're hanging from
we're hanging
right
on
now.
cliffs
We're
these
dangling.
days. Yeah, we're danglers. about really moving into relationship with this dynamic thing of parenting, and seeing what a beautiful aspect of our own growth. And
we'll have Shefali back on this show
For
in
sure.
studio, we hope, and if not in studio, we will have her on the line again.
so we invite you to come back for this and other shows, and we'll be back next week here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.